Margaret Garner, identified as a person of mixed race, was born into slavery as a house slave for the Gaines family on Maplewood Plantation in Boone County, Kentucky. There is speculation that she might have been the daughter of the plantation owner, John Pollard Gaines. In 1849, she entered into marriage with Robert Garner, who was also enslaved. Later that year, the entire plantation, along with all of its enslaved individuals, was sold to John P. Gaines's younger brother, Archibald K. Gaines. The Garners welcomed their first child, Thomas, into the world in early 1850. Margaret Garner's 3 younger children, Samuel, Mary, and Priscilla, were noted as having mixed-race heritage. Each of them was born 5 to 7 months after a child born to Archibald Gaines and his wife. The light-skinned appearance of these children suggested that Archibald Gaines, the only adult white male at Maplewood, was likely their father. The timing of the pregnancies implied that each child was conceived after Gaines's wife had become pregnant and was unavailable for a sexual relationship. In a contemporaneous account, abolitionist Levi Coffin described Margaret Garner at the time of her arrest as mixed race, about 5 feet tall, and appearing to be around 21 or 23 years old. Notably, she bore an old scar on the left side of her forehead and cheek, attributing it to an incident where a white man struck me. Her 2 sons were approximately 4 and 6 years old. Her daughter Mary was 2.5, and the youngest, Priscilla, was an infant. On January 28, 1856, Robert and Margaret Garner, who was pregnant at the time, along with their family members, escaped to Storrs Township, a rural area just west of Cincinnati. This daring escape involved stealing horses, a sleigh, and a gun from their enslaver. Their party, consisting of 17 people, navigated the frozen Ohio River during one of the coldest winters in 60 years. At daybreak, they crossed the ice in Boone County, Kentucky, just west of Covington, and successfully reached Storrs Township. To evade detection, the group later divided. The Garners, accompanied by their 4 children, and Robert's father, Simon, with his wife Mary, sought refuge at the home of Margaret's uncle, Joe Kite. Kite, a former slave himself, lived along Mill Creek below Cincinnati. Simultaneously, 9 other individuals from their party found safe houses in Cincinnati and eventually escaped to Canada through the Underground Railroad. Seeking advice on ensuring the safety of the group, Joe Kite consulted with abolitionist Levi Coffin. Coffin agreed to assist and advised Kite to take the Garners further west of the city, where a significant population of free black individuals resided, and to wait until nightfall. Unfortunately, slave catchers and U.S. Marshals discovered the Garners barricaded inside Kite's house before his return. The law enforcement officials surrounded the property and stormed the house. In the ensuing confrontation, Robert Garner fired several shots, injuring at least 1 deputy marshal. Faced with the prospect of her 2-year-old daughter Mary being returned to slavery, Margaret Garner made a harrowing decision. She chose to end the child's life with a butcher's knife, rather than allow her to endure the horrors of enslavement once more. Margaret had also wounded her other children, intending to take their lives and her own before being subdued by the posse. The entire group, including the Garners, found themselves incarcerated, leading to a trial that extended over 2 weeks. This legal proceeding was declared the longest and most complicated case of its kind, a stark departure from the usual brevity of fugitive slave hearings that typically lasted less than a day. The central dilemma revolved around whether the Garners would be treated as individuals facing charges for the tragic death of their daughter, or regarded as property subject to the fugitive slave law. This contentious debate took place against the backdrop of the defense asserting Ohio's right to safeguard its citizens, while the slave catchers and owner argued for the supremacy of federal law over state jurisdiction. The defense's stance aimed to establish that Margaret Garner had been liberated under a former law pertaining to slaves taken into free states for alternative employment. In a strategic move, her attorney proposed charging her with murder, anticipating a trial in a free state and a subsequent pardon from the governor. On the opposing side, the prosecuting attorney contended that the federal fugitive slave law held precedent over any state murder charges. The courtroom became a spectacle, drawing over 1,000 spectators daily, who lined the streets outside the courthouse. To maintain order, 500 men were deputized in the town. Presiding Judge Pendery ruled in favor of the supervening authority of federal fugitive warrants. In response, defense attorney John Jolliffe attempted to argue that the Fugitive Slave Act violated the guarantee of religious freedom by compelling citizens to participate in what they deemed as an immoral act of returning slaves. However, Judge Pendry rejected this line of argument. Margaret Garner's actions stemmed from the abusive treatment she had endured at the hands of her master and the pervasive mistreatment faced by slaves across the nation. In the context of widespread abuse, women were known to resort to infanticide as a desperate measure to spare their children from the hardships of slavery. In Garner's case, the challenges were exacerbated by her children being mixed race, a status that posed a dual threat. Mixed-race children were perceived as both a potential danger and a disgrace within the plantation and white families. Their birth highlighted infidelity within slave-owning families, often leading to the children being subjected to beatings or being sold. Garner took extreme measures to shield her child not only from the inherent cruelty of the institution of slavery, but also from the additional peril arising from the child's mixed-race status. Despite her grave actions, Margaret Garner did not face an immediate murder trial. Instead, she was compelled to return to a slave state alongside Robert and their youngest child, a 9-month-old daughter. When Ohio authorities sought an extradition warrant to try Garner for murder, their attempts to locate and arrest her proved futile. Archibald Gaines, her owner, continuously relocated her between cities in Kentucky, evading authorities' attempts to bring her to justice. Ohio officials narrowly missed locating Margaret in Covington, and their attempts to apprehend her in Frankfort proved unsuccessful. Eventually catching up with her enslaver in Louisville, they discovered that he had already dispatched the enslaved individuals, including the Garners, on a boat bound for his brother's plantation in Arkansas. According to the Liberator's account, on March 6, 1856, the steamboat Henry Lewis, carrying the Garners, encountered a mishap and began to sink after colliding with another boat. During this calamity, Margaret Garner and her baby daughter were either thrown overboard during the collision, or, as an alternative account suggests, Garner deliberately jumped into the river after tossing her baby. Tragically, the baby drowned. Reports indicated that Margaret expressed frantic joy at her baby's demise and made an attempt to drown herself. Subsequently, Robert and Margaret Garner spent a brief period in Arkansas before being sent to Gaines's family friends in New Orleans to serve as household servants. Following this relocation, the Garners vanished from public view. In 1870, a reporter from the Cincinnati Chronicle located Robert Garner and gleaned more information about his life. Robert and Margaret had worked in New Orleans, and in 1857 they were sold to Judge DeWitt Clinton Bonham for plantation labor at Tennessee Landing in Mississippi. Robert recounted that Margaret had succumbed to typhoid fever in 1858 during an epidemic in the valley. Before her passing, Margaret implored him to never marry again in slavery, but to live in hope of freedom. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing by clicking the red subscribe button below. And don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to us. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.